I was really stunned today to read that Eton College, I mean, in the headline, Eton College has gone into a lockdown. In the detail, when you read a little further into the story, it's not a school-wide lockdown, although they have banned all assemblies and all chapel visits, which make up quite a big part of the curriculum or the schedule at Eton College. But they've, at the start of the week, they put about 50 students under remote tuition. So 50 students had to stay in, I don't know what they're called at Eton. At my school, they were called dormitories or houses, boarding houses. 50 kids had to stay in their boarding houses and do all of their lessons online, do all of their lessons remotely. The entire school was told to wear masks and take daily lateral flow tests, with chapel and assemblies cancelled for the whole week. Now, I look, rightly or wrongly, this particular school obviously inhabits a place in the public consciousness that is entirely disproportionate to the number of people that go there, but oddly entirely proportionate to the number of prime ministers and politicians that have passed through its corridors. And I did remember, I had to do a little bit of digging on your behalf. Don't get all dewy-eyed and grateful. It only took me about 2 minutes to remember what happened last time. I was just trying to think that when the calls were growing, when the clamour was growing for things like lockdowns of schools, and you know, this was a fairly logical response to scenes that we were seeing in places like Italy. But as we know from that report that came out last week, was it earlier this week? It was earlier this week, wasn't it? The kind of received wisdom now has finally caught up with what we were saying at the time. Too little, too late. And I thought, what happened last time? And the official advice. This is the funny thing, isn't it? Do you remember what was that fella's name? He used to be Secretary of State for Education. I think he's gone back to flogging fireplaces now. You remember that everyone should shut up and go, Russia should shut up and go away. That bloke, Gavin Williamson, well done. Do you remember when he was threatening to sue local authorities, state schools for closing? Because right at the beginning of this, the official advice was to stay open and keep teaching. And Eton College decided to shut down and send everybody home. That was one of those moments that we probably should have paid a little bit more attention to. The official advice was still to stay open and keep teaching, whereas Eton College decided to shut down and send pupils home. This was middle of March 2020, so really early doors. 18th of March 2020 is the article I'm reading. And Harrow School closed down due to an infected pupil. Marlborough College in Wiltshire moved to online learning on that very day, on the 18th of March 2020, because it couldn't provide effective boarding and residential care. So the advice for children at state schools remained stay open, put up, shut up, while all of many of the most privileged schools, or the schools that cost the most money to send your children to, were sending their children home. Which just struck me as really interesting, because it's happening again, or not obviously on the same scale, but I would cautiously suggest to you that what they've done at Eton College in response to a number of positive tests goes further than both the official advice and probably further than what's happening at your children's school. So what is the official advice? You're supposed to take 2 lateral flow tests each week during term time. You only get asked to isolate if you've tested positive on a follow-up PCR test or if you're showing symptoms. I don't think there's any compulsory mask wearing in schools, is there? There isn't at my girls' schools. I don't know what it's like at your children's schools. And assemblies and chapel will be very much, I think, in the sort of gift of the head teacher. So that's point number 1. Last time round, March 2020, Eton College shut its doors while the official advice was still to leave them open, and the mood music coming out of government was that they wouldn't be closing down schools at all. So make of that what you will. And then there's this really weird thing happening. When was Freedom Day? What date was Freedom Day? Can anyone remember what date Freedom Day was? June the something? June the what? June the 24th? 24th? 12th? What was it? What was Freedom Day? It was the 21st, was it? Anyway, someone will check. And do you remember when they said, oh dear, this could be risky. There could be 50,000 new cases a day if we're not careful. And then a couple of fellas said there could even be 100,000 new cases a day. And then there were about, 10 or 20,000, and we all relaxed. We all sighed a sigh of relief. I did as well. I'm not criticising anybody. That was really dangerous, I think, because what would you have done if on Freedom Day the warnings, the sort of worst case scenarios that were shared with us, the plebs, the general public, if the worst case scenarios had been something like, well, if you do this, there could be 30 or 40,000 cases a day, what would you have thought then? Because there are now 30 or 40,000 cases a day. In fact, yesterday there were 45,000. I think that's the second time this week that we have seen that we've breached the 40,000 mark. It may even be more than that. And I have to tell you, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll have seen the graphs, which are supported, of course, by the data. The daily new confirmed cases per million people, if you were to plot it as a graph, we're more than 5 times Germany at the moment, and Germany is ahead of France, Italy and Spain. Now, when I say to you, are you paying attention, you might respond by saying, yes, I am, James. Aren't France and Italy and Spain are now better vaccinated than we are? And yet still, we're way ahead. And listen, there are some extrapolations here, the argument that we test more. So then you look at and I think part of the argument with the idea that we test more, therefore we get more cases, is generally you test when you think you've got it, right? Or when you're going somewhere where you need to get in. So the percentage of tests that are positive still puts us head and shoulders above everybody else. And on the vaccine front, we have completely squandered our lead. So are you paying attention? And if so, what's going on? 0345 6060 973. 45,000 new cases and climbing. The school which, I don't know how many members of the cabinet send their children there, but the school which provides more Conservative cabinet ministers and prime ministers than every other school in the country put together. That's incredible, that, isn't it? Is introducing limited lockdowns, mandatory mask wearing, and daily tests for its pupils. Now, I don't want to introduce a class element to this because I think that's a bit silly, and the government aren't making this decision, and it would be silly to say what's good enough for them is good enough for you, isn't good enough for you. This is a school-based decision, and if the head teacher of your children's comprehensive school made these decisions, actually, I don't know if they'd be allowed to, would they? They have to follow Department of Education guidance, otherwise they get threatened with legal action by people like Gavin Williamson. But I digress slightly. I don't want to say should we be worried, because that involves lecturing everybody else. I will say, are you worried?